America holds some of the most unique landscapes and wonders of any country, and it's also the official birthplace of the national park, starting with Yellowstone. This video highlights the best national parks in the western United States, specifically the lower 48 states. We are covering only the contiguous states because Alaska and Hawaii's national parks are very expensive to visit, and in some cases very difficult to navigate. One such example is Gates of the Arctic in Alaska, which is only accessible via backpacking or air taxi. Maybe someday, right?
Bear in mind that this top 10 list is based on how we think the majority of people will experience the parks, and isn't meant to be a definitive be-all end-all for each and every park. The majority of the time visiting the parks was spent during family vacations. Sometimes we brought friends, and we took note of their opinions as well. If your favorite park didn't make the list, please feel free to mention your favorite in the comments section. This video isn't meant to be ultra brief. We want to be specific enough to help educate others on the best locations to visit, and also when to visit these national treasures. Also, if a park is on this list, we feel it is definitely worth at least one visit, if not many.
Just know that after hundreds of peanut butter and honey sandwiches, I finally managed to visit every single park on this list, and my family visited almost all these parks as well, so we do know at least a little about every location. All of the photography you will see in this video is from our adventures. So without further ado, here are the parks we visited listed in alphabetical order.
When we were compiling this list, we knew there had to be some criteria for what constitutes a great national park, besides Congress designating it so. We felt that a park had to offer lots of wilderness, gorgeous scenery, plenty of outdoor activities, and interactions within the area. Or to be more specific, the park needed to offer more than just a pretty view. Any destination on this list also had to offer travelers more to see on repeated visits. And finally, it had to offer something unique that would be difficult, if not impossible, to find outside of the park. So let's get started.
Number 10. Channel Islands National Park. Starting us off is Channel Islands. Now let me state this up front. I don't think the Channel Islands themselves are especially pretty. In fact, there's not much to the islands except the lack of man-made structures and development. However, when you couple that isolation factor with beautiful oceanfront property, which, by the way, is heavily protected and full of sea critters, it offers an experience totally unique among all the parks on this list. Think Catalina Island without anyone or anything on it, and you're starting to get the picture. If you do get a chance before heading to the islands, the visitor center features nice dioramas, a small tide pool aquarium, a cool ocean-themed staircase, and telescopic views of the island, on a clear day. Traveling out to the park requires a tour boat, and while it's not going to break the bank, it's certainly not as cheap as other park entrance fees. One could easily spend over $200 on a round-trip ticket if you have a larger family or a few friends along for the ride, making this the most expensive of the parks to visit. You'll want to get reservations, especially in the summer months when more people visit. The park is open year-round unless there are severe weather conditions. The trip out to the islands offers chances to see sea lions, whales, dolphins, and even orcas if you are lucky. I was able to see all of those mammals, and it certainly was a highlight in the trip. Once the islands appear on the horizon, you will discover they are much larger than anticipated. Santa Cruz Island will be the destination for most visitors. Nearby in the distance is Anacapa Island, which is craggier and features a prominent sea arch. There are other islands besides those as well. On Santa Cruz, you will see a small visitor center and campground, and that's about it in terms of civilization. You'll discover a version of California that existed before European explorers ever set foot in the region. Much of the island feels untouched. If you look closely, you will find small wildlife, including a fox that is native only to that island. There are small flowers and even small groves of trees here and there. Once you climb to the edges of the island, you will get wonderful views of the Pacific Ocean, free from smog and congestion. I wasn't able to camp the night, but I hear the night skies are some of the best and offer a feeling of isolation that can't be matched by mainland parks due to the lack of any automobiles or electricity. There isn't any running water either, so you really have to come prepared, especially if you set up camp. What really makes this park shine is the undersea life surrounding the islands, and unfortunately, I didn't bring snorkel gear. I did see many kayakers, and I hear the scuba diving is the best you will find in California thanks to the rich kelp forest prevalent in the area. The only boats that can approach the island are tour boats that bring people to the island and the occasional government vessel, such as the Coast Guard. This really is the place to go if you want to experience ocean life free from mankind's presence. We will definitely be going back to Channel Islands as this park rewards multiple visits.
Number 9. Arches National Park. Arches isn't all that large when compared to some of the other parks, but there is a lot crammed into this desert landscape. It's probably the most diverse of the desert parks, and you will see everything from sandstone monoliths, to arches, to balanced rocks, to rock fins, and so on. It houses the majority of naturally occurring arches in the world and is definitely worthy of its title. Probably the most popular of the hikes is the Delicate Arch. It's much larger than portrayed in photos and sits next to a natural amphitheater-like canyon. It's really awe-inspiring, and you won't see anything else like it in the world. One of the more unique areas is Sandstone Arch, as it is devoid of any plant life, so it basically feels like you're walking on Mars and exploring a desert planet. Another highlight is Double Arch, which is very tall and served as the backdrop for the third Indiana Jones film. As far as the negatives go, there really aren't that many, except for the heat. If you visit during the summer months, bring plenty of sunscreen and water. Temperatures soar easily into the hundreds, and there's hardly any shade, so good luck. Number 8. Zion National Park. Zion is one of those locales that gets even better the further you go in. Near the main entrance is a small town and even a movie theater, but at the far end of Zion Canyon, the crowds will thin out. This is a popular park for the elderly or those who rely on others to drive them around the park. During spring through fall, passenger vehicles are not allowed on the roads, only shuttle buses that run on propane. This is due to pollution and overparking, and this was a smart move. As far as attractions go, I liked the easily accessible Weeping Gardens Trail, as it felt like an oasis in the desert sun, and many people love Angel's Landing, which offers amazing views of the park. There are short hikes to the Court of the Patriarchs and the Emerald Pools Trail, but what people really come to the park for is one of the most amazing hikes in existence, the Narrows. This hike doesn't require you to be superhuman, as you'll find smaller children and some elderly hikers on the river, but visitors with health conditions should do research before proceeding. You'll be hiking over slick river rocks in knee-deep water almost the entire way, but a couple of sack lunches and a good walking stick are generally enough for those wishing to traverse this amazing canyon. At the Wall Street section, the Virgin River carves sandstone cliffs that are only 20 feet apart and over 2,000 feet high. It's quite a sight, and pictures will never do it justice. This hike would be enough of a recommendation on its own, but it also features an offshoot slot canyon called Orderville Canyon, which offers a more secluded hiking experience along a creek bed. Further up is the subway section of the Narrows, and from what a friend told us, it's his favorite hike of all time. The only big negatives I can think of about the park are, number 1, it's a canyon, and there's only so much you can do in a canyon in terms of exploring, so you can see pretty much everything the park has to offer in just a few days. And number 2, the Narrows hike does have occasional flash flooding during July, August, and September, so check weather constantly or your body could be swept downstream and nauseate the tourists. Overall, this is probably Utah's most majestic and photogenic national park, even when considering the very unique Bryce Canyon. If you visit only one of Utah's national parks, I would recommend Zion.
Number 7. Yosemite National Park. Yosemite is probably one of the most iconic of all the parks along with the Grand Canyon and Yellowstone. These 3 parks are often referred to as the crown jewels of the national park system. So why isn't Yosemite higher on the list? Well, put simply, it's not what it used to be. It really saddens me that this park isn't as lush and wild as it was during its early years. Even when comparing my visit from 2006 to 2015, I noticed a huge change in the health of the area. Don't worry, I'll get to the positives in a minute. Basically, there are 5 things plaguing Yosemite, which, to be fair, can be found in other parks, but they are more prevalent here. Number 1, drought. Recently, California has been experiencing a terrible drought, and the park is definitely showing signs from lack of water. Number 2, wildfires. Much of this is compounded by the drought, and some areas have been totally devastated by wildfires. Number 3, pine beetles. Pine beetles have always been a part of forests, but thanks to warming temperatures, they exist in much larger number and are killing off a lot of the trees. Number 4, commercialization. 95% of the park is designated wilderness, but guess where 95% of the people go? You guessed it, the 5% that makes up Yosemite Valley. There are restaurants, gas stations, hotels, and even a golf course in the park. Some people may like all this convenience, but we belong to the less is more school of thought. Number 5, traffic. traffic, traffic, and more traffic. Don't get me wrong, all the cars and people you see here have just as much right to be in the park as we do, but with conflicting local opinion over exclusive shuttle bus rights and other legal red tape, this problem is getting worse. Hopefully the national park system can reach a resolution soon, because it's gotten so bad that people have abandoned their cars on the road just to use the bathroom in the summer months. We've been stuck in gridlock traffic in Manhattan for 3 hours, and this was far worse. Now, with all that negativity out of the way, I can tell you just how amazing this park is. One of the main things you will notice about the park is its sheer verticality. This park is very photogenic. When Yosemite Falls is at its peak flow, you will swear you walked into a painting. Then there is the valley itself. Calm grass valleys mixed with tall pines and easy-flowing rivers make this a nature lover's paradise. It can be so serene and even therapeutic during the right times. My favorite view in the park is of the Cathedral Rocks and nearby Merced River. There's a feeling of peace and stability in this area that's kind of hard to describe. Half Dome is, of course, one of the most iconic rock formations in the world, and something that you will want to see if you choose to visit. Another amazing area is the hike to the Mist Fall Trails, which ends with a powerful vernal falls. When hiking this trail, you really get a sense of what it must have been like for the early advocates of the park, like John Muir and Teddy Roosevelt. In addition to the granite giants and waterfalls, there are a couple of giant sequoia groves that are quite impressive, though not as majestic as the ones in Sequoia National Park. The Mariposa Grove has recently been shut down for repairs, but should be ready to go in a couple years. One of the best ways to experience the wilderness is to visit Yosemite's high country, such as Tuolumne Meadows and Tenaya Lake. Yosemite sits in the high Sierras, so if you bring the right gear, you can escape civilization entirely. Overall, I would recommend experiencing Yosemite at least once in your lifetime. It offers unforgettable scenery, plenty of activities like rafting, fishing. Oh, and by the way, this is a rock climber's mecca if you didn't already know that. If you go during the right seasons, like any time other than summer, Yosemite really is a park just about everyone can enjoy. Number 6, Glacier National Park. Glacier Park can be stunning. It features the large and beautiful Lake McDonald, high peaks with snowy patches and waterfalls, glacially carved canyons, the very popular St. Mary Lake, which looks like a postcard, bighorn sheep and mountain goats, forest trails like Avalanche Creek, cool blue rivers, and even a boardwalk featuring cedar trees which smell divine. Are you sold yet? Well, before you pack your bags, bear in mind that this video is intended for a wider audience, and not all people who visit Glacier will experience it the same way. What a visitor gets out of their experience at Glacier Park is directly related to how much time and energy they're willing to put into it. Most people who visit national parks are casual tourists, and casual tourists might be surprised to find that secluded mountain vistas won't come easily here, and that camping in solitude takes more effort than they might have initially expected. Glacier Park is quite commercialized at its main entrances, featuring man-made locales like a grocery store, train station, and yes, there's even a golf course here too, but that's on the Canada side. Adding to the mix, there's only one paved road that runs through the entirety of the park, dubbed Going to the Sun Road. Due to snow and ice, the road is only fully open a third of the year tops, usually late June through mid-September. This means tourists will rush to the park on their motorcycles, RVs, and minivans in concentrated groups. So just like Yosemite, you can expect to sit in traffic jams, especially when the road needs repairs from harsh erosion. Compounding the problem of crowds is a shortage of easily hiked trails. The trails marked easy range from a boardwalk that's wheelchair accessible, Trail of the Cedars, to a hike over a glacier and up the side of a mountain that can give athletes a workout, the Hidden Lake Nature Trail. There are only a few trails that the majority of visitors will commit to, and if you're one of them, expect that you may never see a trail devoid of humans. If you do wish to hike away from the crowds, just realize that not many people are prepared for what this park is willing to dish out in its more remote areas, so do your research before planning a trip. Some of the more strenuous hikes feature clinging to a garden hose on a windy cliffside that lasts for miles, or going way out to the middle of nowhere amongst the grizzly bears. To some, that higher risk will be a paradise, to others, a harsh reality. Others might feel slightly gypped, especially when considering the name of the park. If you're expecting glaciers like the ones in Alaska that calve and crack, you'll be fairly disappointed, as these are all alpine glaciers, and there are far fewer of them than when the park initially opened due to climate problems. In addition, recent wildfires have tarnished many of the popular areas, including Logan Pass. If I sound negative about the park, it's because many of my initial expectations were shattered. But to be fair, it can be a gorgeous park, especially in the quieter seasons. All in all, I can recommend this park to most people, but not to everyone. As I stated, it asks a lot from its visitors to get the full experience. That's why it's lower on this list. But to those who are dedicated and healthy, you will be hard-pressed to find a prettier alpine paradise in the lower 48 states. And it certainly deserves a spot on the top 10 list. If you're into high country backpacking, don't pass this one up.
Number 5, North Cascades National Park. When we first did research on North Cascades, we didn't think we would spend much time there as a family. It's kind of out there in the middle of nowhere, situated just under the Canadian border. Many of the trails were like those at Glacier National Park, hard to access and not child-friendly. One of the trails we were looking forward to, Cascade Pass, had been shut down during the month we went to Washington, due to road and trail repairs. Then came the forest fires during one of Washington's worst droughts. Diablo Lake wasn't taking on any boat tours either. And on top of all that, the main road going through the park passes small towns, a dam with power lines everywhere, and is surrounded by mountains. So just like Glacier, there aren't any small roads that venture out into the wilderness. It didn't seem very promising. Well, we did encounter all of those things, and just barely missed the large forest fire affecting the main entrance. But even with all of those things going on against this park, North Cascades manages to earn a solid spot on this list. Why? Quite simply, this is one of the most beautiful areas in the United States. Mount Shuksan ended up being our favorite mountain of all time, and we've seen a lot of mountains. Many places claim to be the Alps of North America. I'm sorry, but most of those places look nothing like the Alps. But if anything comes close, it would be the North Cascades. Some of the areas in and around the park seem to be unreal, like walking onto a movie set or an open-world video game. There are basalt formations next to small glacier lakes and streams. We went early in the fall and saw so many wonderful colors. We're looking forward to coming back in the early summer to see all of the wildflowers. Just outside the park, in the Mount Baker ski area, is a small visitor center and picnic area. Our family had a wonderful time here hiking, sitting next to a warm fire inside, and eating dinner at one of those beautiful picnic areas in existence. Our time at Diablo Lake was also rewarding. The water is an aqua teal color due to crushed rock from glaciers, and it truly is a beautiful lake. There's a small nature trail by the lake's visitor center, and it's actually quite varied and a great place for families. Going west down the road, you'll see the main visitor center, which is one of the most charming we've encountered. We also loved the higher areas of the park on the east side, next to Liberty Bell Mountain. There is a real sense of alpine wilderness with deep dark forests and all kinds of vegetation. This area is just outside of park boundaries, but is on the same road going through the park, so most people include it in their park experience. North Cascades houses the most glaciers of any other national park in the lower 48 states. We saw lots of glaciers, and this was the only park we've ever been to where we could actually hear the glaciers cracking and popping. It sounds kind of like thunder in the distance when the glaciers calve, and really gives a sense of being in a wild mountain environment that few other parks can offer, Glacier Park included. In our opinion, this park should hold the Glacier moniker, but it's too late for that. Just know that this is one of the best places for alpine serenity and mountain glaciers.
Number 4, Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Parks. This is the only tie on the list, but there's a good reason for that. These two parks are generally considered one park due to their congenital twin borders and landscapes. The parks are so similar in nature that the feds should really just turn this into one larger park. Even the main brochure covers both parks in the title and map sections as well. Unlike the not-too-distant Yosemite, Sequoia and Kings Canyon cleared out a lot of the touristy attractions and man-made clutter, making for a more natural, refreshing park experience. They even bulldozed a historic restaurant to preserve a mountain meadow. Minus a forest museum and a few park ranger facilities, the park is mainly trails and a few paved roads. I mention this because it does have a significant impact on the feel of the park. You really start to feel at one with nature here, and generally speaking, you are free from man-made distractions. After venturing off the beaten path, you could be alone for hours or even days before encountering another human, which is surprising given California's dense population. The Sierra Nevada mountains are in the park borders, along with soothing waterfalls, alpine meadows, quiet forests, and even a tour-guided mountain cave. Even the Great Mount Whitney sits on the park border, which is the tallest mountain in the lower 48 states. In the park, we saw deer, all kinds of birds, and even 2 black bears. Of course, the main attractions are the sequoia trees, the largest tree on Earth measured by volume, and in this regard, Sequoia National Park will impress even the most seasoned city slickers. These trees are impressive, intimidating, and just plain gorgeous to look at. Not even the redwoods seem as majestic on an individual level. Collectively maybe, but the sequoia groves offer the chance to see the tops of the trees contrasted next to other tall trees and humans, which is rare to see in a redwood forest. Adding to their beauty is the dark orange-red color, which kind of makes you think these trees should have been called redwoods, and the ones on the coast should have been called sequoias, but I digress. Technically, they are in the redwood tree family, so some of them will grow to be over 300 feet tall and over 50 feet wide. We stayed the night at Dorst Creek Campground and enjoyed a quiet campsite experience. The night sky was clear and full of glistening stars. It was amazing waking up to the cool morning and cooking breakfast on a warm fire with the sound of airbrushing through the tall pine trees. This is what camping is all about, and it was a completely different experience than camping at, say, a crowded beach down in Carlsbad, California. The only negatives here are the occasional crowds, which are mainly concentrated at the General Sherman tree, the largest living thing on Earth. And no, I'm not counting aspen groves or algae forests on the list of largest living things, because that's lame. Also, the beauty of this park is being affected by the massive drought in California, so if you can, visit before the trees start dying off or after the park gets lots of rain, hopefully soon. Other than that, the park features winding mountain roads no matter how you enter the park, which can be a bad thing for those who get car sick. But if you take it easy, you will be treated to some lush hillsides carpeted with all kinds of trees, highlands, and farmland. It's a wonderful experience, and if you're a Californian, don't pass up the opportunity to visit Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Parks. Even if you're not a Californian, it's a great experience. Number 3, Redwood National Park. Redwoods National Park is actually a collection of state parks along with a national park that was established in 1968. The parks lie in the northwesternmost point of California and feature the tallest trees in the world, which can stand over 370 feet tall. But Redwoods isn't just about tall trees. It also contains gorgeous, craggy coastlines teeming with life, soft sandy beaches, teal-colored rivers and streams, rolling hills with wildflowers, lush meadows, blackberries you can eat off the vine, the majestic Roosevelt elk, and many other plants and animals. If you're up to it, you can even surf or kayak in the park. So if you're looking for a refreshing getaway with clean, moist air and all sorts of vegetation, look no further than the Redwoods. There are many hiking trails, and even in the busy seasons, you will only occasionally see a few backpackers here or there once you get into the trails. The park is free too, thanks to generous donations. But what really sets the Redwoods apart is the sense of wonder you will feel when you arrive. The forests feel prehistoric and dwarf all who visit, giving a feeling of security and seclusion from the daily grind. It's very peaceful and serene here. It's also very photogenic when the fog rolls in, which isn't that rare of an occurrence. And if you are lucky, you will see fairy tale-like god rays shining through the forest. When the fog evens out, there is even a soft mist that permeates the park and gives the forest a soft, kind of warm glow during the afternoon. There really isn't anything else like it in the world. Even Redwood State Parks a few hours south can't match the magic of having these amazing giants standing right up next to the rocky shores. Having said that, I recommend seeing those parks too, due to the abundance of old-growth trees on the alluvial plains. Redwood Park happens to be my favorite national park. To me, it's a magical place. There have been many moments when I felt like I was in another world, and when leaving Redwoods, it felt like I was getting kicked out of heaven. I know that's a little bit dramatic, but it's pretty amazing. My wife and kids were really happy here too, with smiles on everyone's faces each time we visited. It's really something everyone should experience at least once in their lifetime, and if you get a chance, don't pass up the amazing Damnation Creek Trail, which is my favorite hike in the park. Now, after such a glowing recommendation, you may be wondering what the negatives are. There really aren't that many. There are a couple of highways that run through the park to get you from point A to B, but once you get off the highway, you are in immediate seclusion, so that's not a major issue. The park is on the edge of the continent and isn't really convenient to get to, so prepare to travel a ways through meandering roads. It's not very commercial, which I like, but that also means packing in food and snacks and bringing a tent unless you want to sleep in nearby Crescent City. Tall trees and lush forests are the main attraction here, and I'm aware that Redwoods isn't going to be everyone's idea of a good time. Having said that, I can recommend this park to most people, and I don't think they will be disappointed. In fact, their expectations will probably be surpassed.
Number 2, Mount Rainier National Park. It's hard to know where to start with Rainier, so let's just get the negatives out of the way first, so we can focus on every reason you need to go to this park. The first negative for us was actually trying to see the mountain, the main attraction. Mount Rainier is so huge that it actually creates its own weather patterns. This means that the mountain is subject to going in and out of fog on a very consistent basis. It's so common that the park site features webcams monitoring the mountain, so you can check visibility. Just check the weather forecast before going, but even then, no guarantees. The mountain can be covered for weeks at a time. The only other negative we can think of is the elusive wildlife. There are elk, bear, and mountain goats in the park, along with smaller critters like pika, but we didn't see any of them for some reason. We did see a lot of birds, however. Now moving on to the good news, this park is ridiculously gorgeous at any time of year. There's even a quote by John Muir speaking of the Mount Rainier area that states it is the most luxuriant and the most extravagantly beautiful of all the alpine gardens I had ever beheld in all my mountaintop wanderings. We decided to go on an unmaintained trail next to the Nisqually Glacier. The best way to describe it was that it felt like hiking through the wilds of Alaska. We haven't been to Alaska yet, but from everything we've seen and heard, this seems to match up pretty closely. Seeing the glacier was inspiring. It's huge, and many people don't know that Mount Rainier is the most heavily glaciated of all the peaks in the lower 48. As mentioned earlier, North Cascades has more glaciers in its borders, but Mount Rainier is the place to go if you really want to see the largest concentration on one mountain. Mount Rainier truly is a vision. But let's not forget the area surrounding the mountain. There's a hike to the Silver Falls, which is one of my husband's favorites. It's so quintessentially Washington in look and feel. Nearby is the Grove of the Patriarchs, which is very family-friendly and crosses a beautiful river, ending in a tall stand of firs, hemlocks, and cedars. There are many other roads that travel through the park, with many hiking trails, tunnels, and waterfalls. One unique area is a slot canyon called Box Canyon. The waterfalls really steal a lot of the show here, and are some of the best you'll see anywhere in the States. Narada Falls and Christine Falls are favorites in the park and don't look anything like each other. There really is a lot of variety here. There's even a rainforest that sits at the northwest corner of the park. The Tipsoo Lake area is also very worth visiting and features amazing photographs of the mountain on a clear day. The visitor centers and staff are some of the best you will find. There are warm lodges with fireplaces, hot cocoa, some amazing chili, and just about anything you could want before hiking the mountain. Just watch out for this guy. For some reason, he didn't seem happy like the others. We could go on about the park and its many wonderful trails. We are already planning on going back in a couple of years, and are looking forward to seeing all the things we missed the first time around. The bottom line is this: we can recommend this park to just about anybody. Unless you hate mountain scenery, this park is for you. Before getting to our number one spot, we need to mention why one park didn't make this list. We hope the state of Arizona and all the fanboys and girls will forgive us for not including the West's most popular national park, the Grand Canyon. This park is so iconic and so traveled that we think a brief explanation is in order. So one of our criteria for rating the parks is uniqueness, and Grand Canyon certainly fits in that category. We also were blown away by Carlsbad Caverns, an incredibly unique cave system that's so huge, you'll feel like you stepped into a Lord of the Rings set. And then there's the very unique Crater Lake, a lake that no picture can properly portray. A lake so large and amazing that when my husband first saw it, and I know this sounds cliche, his jaw literally dropped. We've seen a lot of amazing things, and we've never had our breath taken away before, so why didn't these amazing parks make the list, especially the Grand Canyon? Well, as breathtaking as they are, and as unique as they are, there isn't much to offer visitors besides a very pretty view. Don't get me wrong, if you want to get into sticky situations and go spelunking or cliff diving, you can find it at these parks. But with the Grand Canyon, the vast majority of people will not go rafting down the Colorado River or go hiking all the way to Havasu Falls. Most people who experience the park ride up in a tour bus or in an air-conditioned car, get out in 100-degree weather, and take pictures of a beautiful view. And that's about it. These are the kinds of parks that can be experienced in a day or two, and unless you're willing to do some serious rock climbing, geological researching, or ride a mule down a steep cliff, you won't get much else out of the park. These kinds of locations seem more fit for national monuments than parks. A park, at least to us, offers a lot to see and do, a lot of interactivity with the surroundings, and it deserves repeated visits. We know there are exceptions to Grand Canyon in stating that it's just a pretty view. We would even have chosen Canyonlands for this list over the Grand Canyon. To us, it's just as pretty, offers more diversity and easily accessible trails, has lots of paved and dirt roads, has 2 rivers for water sports instead of 1, and much more. But just remember, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and this list isn't the 10 Commandments.
Number 1. Yellowstone National Park. Well, you finally made it to our number 1 park, Yellowstone. It seems fitting that the world's first national park made it to the number 1 spot on the list, but we didn't plan it that way. As I mentioned earlier, Redwood National Park is my favorite park. It's my jam. It feels like home to me. I can't fully explain why, but I do have to admit when my favorite is beaten, and Yellowstone, even with its few flaws, certainly takes the number 1 spot, and not just by a margin. One of the first things you will notice about the park is just how big it is. It takes a long time to get around the Figure 8 Loop, which features Yellowstone's main attractions. There are so many destinations to see, and they can actually vary quite a bit. Yes, you will see all kinds of hydrothermal wonders, including geysers, hot springs, fumaroles, cascading springs, and even mud-spattering wonders. This park features the highest concentration of geysers on planet Earth. But even without those attractions, this would still be wilderness worthy of exploration. Let's start with the wildlife. Yellowstone is sometimes referred to as the Serengeti of North America, and it's easy to see why. There are buffalo roaming all over the park, there are beautiful elk, deer, and moose, and it's also the only park where we managed to see a grizzly bear in the wild. Pretty amazing. Combined with the thousands and thousands of acres full of rugged wilderness, this is one of the only parks where you feel like nature can tame mankind, instead of the other way around. It really feels wild throughout most of the park thanks to the preservation efforts dating all the way back to the Civil War. Yellowstone officially became a national park in 1872 and was even protected by the U.S. Cavalry for some time. One term a friend of mine kept using to describe Yellowstone was prehistoric, especially when he saw Porcelain Basin. To me, Yellowstone feels like stepping back into the Wild West before settlers arrived in greater numbers. We weren't expecting those kinds of vibes, as most national parks feel tamed by modern convenience. It's so rugged, in fact, that many people have died in the park from being either stupid or not respecting what nature can dish out. But this element of danger actually makes the park feel like a national park, something to be protected, a feeling that you won't get in any other place. It sounds kind of weird, but you'll experience primal euphoria if you spend more than a day in Yellowstone's wilderness areas. There are other aspects to the park, like the incredibly majestic Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone, with a waterfall that's over 300 feet tall. It's the largest volume waterfall in the Rocky Mountains, giving it a feeling of raw power that few can match. This site would be a national monument unto itself, but it's only one of many places in Yellowstone that offer a unique and rich experience. If you want snow-capped mountains, you can find them on the eastern and northeastern side of the park. And let's not forget the neighboring Grand Teton National Park, which sits directly on the southern border of Yellowstone. Grand Tetons offer an amazing backdrop to Yellowstone, and it is currently included in the park entrance fee, a 2-for-1 deal. And yes, Grand Teton is well worth the visit, even if all you see is the amazing peaks which are like nothing else in the Rockies. Yellowstone also has vast forests to explore, and this is probably where the first nitpick will come into play. The forests are amazing, filled with white pines and lodgepole pines for miles and miles. But there were some devastating fires in the 1980s which burnt around a third of the park, leaving a giant scar on the north end, especially around Mount Washburn. You will see some dead trees around the geysers and hot springs, which looks totally natural. But seeing acres and acres of dead trees isn't natural. Fortunately, this was a long time ago and most of the forest has recovered, and it's really only noticeable in key locations. Most of the time, you will just see trees as far as the eye can see. There are many lazy rivers in the park, making it a fly fisherman's paradise. It's a great place to snowmobile, snowshoe, or cross-country ski in the wintertime because the park is mostly flat. It also has many biking trails, and of course there's America's highest elevation freshwater lake to explore on a motorboat or canoe. Yellowstone Lake is huge. I could go on, but just know that unless you absolutely hate nature and the outdoors, you will find at least one thing, if not many things, to love about Yellowstone. It is the mountain man's paradise, God's country, the great outdoors, whatever you want to call it. It's the one national park I can recommend to everyone. Now before we end this video, you're probably wondering if there are any big negatives to Yellowstone, besides the forest fires I mentioned. Well, there isn't much to talk about in that regard. Hotels surrounding the park or located in the park are expensive. Sometimes there's traffic, but it's usually pretty decent, even in busier months, due to the park's ingenious road system. The most crowded part is Old Faithful, but you probably knew that already. That's the one place where you get the feeling that mankind has completely dominated the planet. But other than that, there's really not much to complain about. Basically, if you see one national park, make it Yellowstone, our #1 pick. We hope you enjoyed the video, and remember to share it with all your outdoor buddies. Thanks for watching.